3:07 a.m. The wind off the Mississippi cut through Minneapolis like a blade. The river was black and silent, edged with ice. Downtown looked asleep, but the port district never truly stopped. Floodlights hung over stacked containers, throwing hard shadows across frozen asphalt. Cranes stood like giants over rows of metal boxes most Americans would never notice. This wasn't a street corner. This was infrastructure, the kind that moves a country without anyone thinking about it. No sirens, no flashing lights. 3 unmarked federal vehicles rolled in from separate access roads, tires crunching on salted ice. Doors opened softly. Agents stepped out fast, faces covered, breath turning white. FBI, DHS, and HSI moved with rehearsed precision. Gate 12 cameras didn't record their entry, not because they were blinded, but because the feed had already been looped. At 3:08 a.m., the perimeter was secured. At 3:09, 2 port supervisors were pulled aside and cuffed before they understood what was happening. At 3:10, the team reached the building that mattered, the Port Authority Cyber Unit. From the outside, it was nothing. Brick, badge reader, dull sign. Inside, it was the nerve center of the terminal. Container assignments, inspection windows, gate logs, customs timing. Every digital switch that decided whether a shipment lived or vanished. At 3:11 a.m., a cloned access card clicked the lock open. The hallway was warm and dim, filled with server hum and stale coffee. Boots moved in a straight line. No shouting, no chaos. In 78 seconds, every door to the server wing was controlled. 2 technicians were on their knees, hands behind their heads, staring at the floor like the world had ended without an alarm. Then came the reinforced office door. Steel core, upgraded hinges, a recently replaced frame. Someone had paid to make it hold. The breach charge flashed, a dull blast. The lock snapped. Agents flooded in, weapon lights cutting over monitors, paperwork, framed award photos. On the desk, 2 screens still glowed. A terminal was logged in. A cup of tea still steamed faintly. This was supposed to be a simple seizure, devices and records tied to a laundering probe. That's what the warrant said. That's what most of the task force believed. Then an agent noticed the scuff marks, not on the desk, on the floor beneath it. Fresh scratches, like something heavy had been slid back and forth. The desk was shifted. A floor panel didn't sit flush. One corner flexed. A thin seam appeared when the flashlight hit it. At 3:13 a.m., the panel was pried open. Below wasn't storage. It was steel-lined, professionally fitted, sealed like a vault. Inside were 3 things that turned the room cold. Encrypted flash arrays, labeled with short tags. Tide window, safe pass, whitelist, empty return. A compact satellite modem blinking once every 5 seconds, active, still talking to something outside. And a sealed portfolio of shipping manifests, stamped with the same phrase over and over, like paperwork designed to shut down suspicion. Humanitarian logistics. One agent flipped through the pages. The numbers didn't make sense, until they did. Container IDs that existed in the system with no scan history. Physical scans with no digital record. Weight logs changed after the fact. Inspection windows opening and closing in minutes. Ghost containers. Shipments that existed on paper, but not in reality. And shipments that existed in reality, but not on paper. By 3:14 a.m., analysts confirmed the scale. Over 11 months, 19 containers tied to that label moved through with clean clearance. No holds, no secondary inspection. Each one left within 38 minutes. Total moved volume? $480 million. Not profit, movement, machine-level traffic. Then came the detail that stopped even veterans. The manifests listed overseas destinations, but the GPS pings from surviving gate logs showed the containers never reached outbound lanes. They went inland, through controlled checkpoints into private yards, where customs didn't breathe and cameras didn't watch. At 3:16 a.m., network activity spiked. A wave of deletions rolled through logs like a digital fire. Someone was erasing the last 10 minutes, not from the port, but from inside the cyber unit. Automated, pre-built, triggered by a single signal. The raid wasn't a surprise to everyone. A monitor flashed for half a second before it went black. Cleanse started. In that moment, it stopped being about fraud or contraband, because if someone inside a major American port could rewrite what was real, erase what was recorded, and move 500 million through humanitarian cargo, then the border wasn't being crossed, it was being edited. And the people doing it weren't hiding in alleys. They were sitting behind badges, in warm offices, with access to the switches that decide what the country sees. Before we go any deeper, drop a comment right now. Greed or control? And tap like if you believe America's ports are the most vulnerable battlefield no one talks about. Because what agents found next wasn't drugs on the floor. It was a plan, and it was already in motion. For most of the country, the Port Authority Cyber Unit was invisible, a forgotten office in a cold industrial district. But inside federal headquarters, one name had been building quietly in briefing folders for years: Malik Noor Rahman. To the public, he was a miracle story. Arrived with nothing, learned fast, rose into a role nobody questioned because the results always looked clean. His face showed up in local archives beside awards and smiling officials, praised as the man who protected critical infrastructure. By 3:19 a.m., Rahman sat in a secured federal vehicle, hands cuffed, staring forward without blinking. No panic, just calculation. Investigators had been tracking his money trail long before the raid. It began with an anomaly: contracts awarded too quickly, vendors winning bids with no staff, no equipment, no real footprint. In Rahman's world, cybersecurity contractors existed only on paper: empty suites, dead numbers, websites born and deleted within 90 days. On paper, it sounded legitimate: firewall modernization, camera upgrades, terminal optimization. The numbers climbed from hundreds of thousands to millions until auditors stopped calling it routine. 6-year confirmed total, $96 million. Not stolen in one dramatic heist, not wired in one obvious transfer. It moved in controlled fragments: $49,000, $78,000, $95,000, always under thresholds that triggered deeper review, routed through intermediaries. Labeled as maintenance spending, no politician wanted to slow down. Protect the port, they said. The port is a target, they said. Don't delay the upgrades, they said. The system rewarded speed. It punished skepticism. Rahman mastered that environment like an engineer. But money wasn't the most dangerous part. The most dangerous part was what disappeared whenever his name got close to a file. Over 5 years, 33 high-risk cargo inspections were scheduled. Random checks, surprise holds, secondary scans. In 21 cases, the inspection was canceled less than 40 minutes before it began. Official excuses varied: staffing, mechanical failure, weather, redeployments. The digital logs told the truth. The window didn't collapse. It was manually closed. The order came from elevated privileges. Not a supervisor, not a guard, not an inspector, a cyber administrator. Every time the window closed, the cargo moved. Every time the cargo moved, the transfers followed. And then the evidence vanished. By 3:41 a.m., agents had the first complete reconstruction on a secure screen. Not a list of drugs, not a ledger of bribes, a map of outcomes. A blueprint showing how one person with the right access could decide what was inspected, what was ignored, and what simply never existed. Rahman didn't need to touch contraband. He only had to touch the truth. That's why ghost containers mattered more than any seizure. Because drugs can be taken, cash can be counted. But when the database becomes the weapon, the country loses the ability to measure what's real. And Rahman's reach extended far beyond the port gates. Phone analysis revealed 5 rotating devices. At first, it looked like normal work traffic, but split by time and location, the structure appeared. Legal brokers, financial intermediaries, shipping coordinators, security supervisors, and the 5th device. The 5th never activated on port property, never pinged in city limits. It stayed dark like a dead thing kept for emergencies. It powered on 4 times in 8 months. Each activation matched an event no one could explain. A held shipment cleared in under 2 minutes. A truck entering without a matching scan. A manifest changing destination after departure. That device wasn't for business, it was for control. The deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became why no whistleblower surfaced. Because each event alone looked harmless. A canceled inspection, a delayed scan, a corrected weight log, a reroute, all explainable in a working port. But together, it was surgical. And the most disturbing proof wasn't even in the shipping data. It was in the cases that died afterward. In 9 prosecutions, state teams built narcotics charges around cargo they believed entered the port. Wiretaps pointed to it. Surveillance saw the trucks. Then the scans came back clean. Manifests said, empty return. Windows closed. Shipments disappeared into inland routes that never existed on paper. Cases were dropped, not because suspects were innocent, but because the system insisted the shipments never existed. By 4:08 a.m., in a secured interview room, Rahman finally spoke. Not a confession, not anger. One sentence delivered with quiet certainty. You can't stop what you can't prove. Across from him, the agent didn't reply. He didn't need to, because back in the cyber unit, the deletion wave had slowed, but it hadn't stopped. Data was still being wiped, log mirrors still collapsing, cleanup protocols still running in places no employee should reach. The network was still alive. Someone else still had the keys. And whatever was in motion wasn't designed to protect Rahman. It was designed to continue without him. Before we continue, drop a comment right now. Do you think Rahman was the mastermind or just the gatekeeper? Because what agents discovered at 4:11 a.m. behind the server wall didn't just explain the past. It revealed the future. And it carried a name that hadn't been spoken in years. Not in public. Not in courtrooms, only in classified briefings. Esteban Santo Vega. At 4:11 a.m., the cyber unit wasn't just a crime scene anymore. It was a machine trying to erase itself. Servers hummed louder as deletion scripts fired in short bursts. Logs collapsed in real time. Nobody was panicking. Somebody was executing a cleanup plan. In the back corner, an agent noticed a flaw most people would miss. A section of paneling behind binders didn't match. The grain ran wrong. The screws were new. The spacing was off by less than a centimeter. He pressed his palm against it. The panel flexed. A latch clicked. The wall slid open. Inside was a steel-lined cavity built into the structure. Designed, not improvised. A laptop sat on a foam cradle like a weapon in storage. No logos, no serial number. Reinforced casing, sealed ports. When he touched it, it was warm. Used minutes earlier. By 4:13 a.m., cyber specialists isolated the device. No struggle to get in. The system opened almost immediately, like the owner expected it. The desktop was clean. Too clean. Folders looked boring at a glance. Whitelist. Inside were credentials, inspection bypass codes, camera loop triggers, route overrides. Official level access you don't steal, you're given it. Then they opened Tidegate. The room went silent. It wasn't a record of past crimes, it was a future operation. Timelines, gate diagrams, satellite images, and a funding sheet with one number highlighted. $62 million. Bribes. Extraction crew. Diversion vehicles. Comms relays. Legal interference. Not desperation, confidence. Container build showed a refrigerated unit, modified with a hidden capsule, oxygen supply, medical packs, thermal masking. A human extraction container. Relief cargo as camouflage. Manifest swap listed the window. 7 minutes, 12 seconds. 7 minutes to rewrite reality. 7 minutes to flip a held shipment into cleared cargo. The target wasn't named until target profile opened. A grainy photo, hard eyes, late 40s. A man federal teams chased for years with nothing to show in court. Esteban Santo Vega. At 4:27 a.m., a master timer pulsed on screen, synced to every phase. Container release, 5:58. Gate exit, 6:07. Inland transfer, 6:31. No return after 7 o'clock. Once Vega cleared the port system, he would disappear into the inland supply chain and never come back. At 4:33 a.m., command centers lit up. Calls went out. Units activated. Air support staged. Interception teams moved. This was no longer about ghost containers or stolen money. It was an extraction already in motion. Before we continue, comment stop if you think this should have been shut down years ago. And hit like if you want the shutdown minute by minute. Because by 5:38 a.m., the plan was no longer on a screen. The first truck was already rolling. At 5:38 a.m., discovery became interception. In a secure command room miles from the port, analysts threw live feeds across a wall. Gate cameras, thermal overlays, drone angles, truck logs. Every signal still alive before the cleanup scripts finished their work. Nobody spoke in full sentences anymore. Only short calls, confirmations, numbers. Because the window wasn't hours, it was minutes. Outside, everything looked normal. Cranes still, lights steady, trucks idling in the cold. But the terminal was moving like clockwork, and someone had planned every tick. At 5:52 a.m., a container stamped Humanitarian Logistics scanned into a low-risk lane. Manifest, medical supplies. Weight, perfect. Seal code, clean. Too perfect. At 5:56 a.m., a forklift crew staged it near Terminal 12 like it was routine. At 5:58 a.m., the master clock hit the exact milestone from the laptop. Container release. Status flipped from held to cleared. Not because a supervisor approved it, because the system approved itself. The override ping came from elevated credentials that shouldn't exist anymore. Rahman was already in custody, yet his signature appeared like a ghost hand still pressing buttons. Someone else had the keys, and they were wearing his identity as camouflage. At 6:01 a.m., the tractor backed in. The driver hooked up, checked the coupling, and rolled out like it was just another morning run. The truck headed for Gate 12 along a route designed to avoid the busiest checkpoints. At 6:03 a.m., federal teams moved. 2 unmarked vehicles slid into position. DHS agents in reflective jackets stepped out like port security. A drone lifted silently, tracking the truck from above. At 6:05 a.m., the first red flag hit. The gate scan didn't register. No entry, no exit, no timestamp. The truck crossed the sensor line like it moved through air. A ghost run. At 6:06 a.m., command made the call. Lock the perimeter, now. Steel barriers dropped. Gate lights flipped to red. Vehicles surged to seal the service corridor. The goal was simple: stop the truck without turning the port into a war zone or killing whoever was inside the box. But the network had planned for that too. At 6:07 a.m., 2 port security vehicles cut hard into the lane and accelerated straight at the federal teams. No sirens, no warnings, just impact. Metal slammed into metal, jolting an SUV sideways. For 1 second, chaos tried to spread. Then the response snapped into place. Doors open, weapons up, commands echoing off steel walls. The truck broke left toward a restricted maintenance corridor. It made it 40 meters. A third federal vehicle clipped the front axle. The tractor skidded, tires screaming on ice. The driver fought the wheel and kept pushing, trying to drag the container through the gap. That's when the gunfire started. Short bursts, controlled, not sprayed, not random. A fight meant to create space, not headlines. At 6:09 a.m., the truck stopped dead. Agents swarmed it in seconds, ripping the driver out and forcing him face down onto the ice. No resistance, no talking, blank eyes. Because he wasn't the mission, the container was. At 6:10 a.m., cutters hit the seal. The lock snapped. The doors swung open and cold air spilled out, sharp and chemical, like the inside had been overcooled on purpose. A refrigeration fan still spun quietly overhead. For 3 seconds, it looked empty. Then a flashlight caught the seam. A reinforced false panel, professionally installed. An agent struck it. It rang like steel. They pried it open. Behind it was a padded capsule sized for 1 body. Webbing straps, oxygen lines, a medical kit, a pulse monitor blinking to the master clock. Inside, half-conscious under sedation, was a man with a shaved head and eyes that refused to fully close. Esteban Santo Vega. At 6:12 a.m., the moment the face was confirmed, command centers went silent. Not from shock, because everyone understood what it meant. This wasn't contraband. This was extraction. And the only reason it almost worked was because the port system itself was part of the weapon. But the operation wasn't over. The second Vega was in federal hands. The cyber attack intensified. At 6:14 a.m., remaining camera feeds began dropping. Black screens, dead angles, route logs erasing as vehicles moved. Someone was trying to blind the terminal long enough to create one last diversion, one last escape path, one last chance to pull him back. An analyst in the command room shouted one word: secondary. That's when agents realized the plan had redundancy. The container was never meant to be the only exit. It was meant to be the bait. Before we continue, comment exit if you think the network still had one more move left, and hit like if you want to see what federal agents discovered next. Because at 6:18 a.m., radar picked up a vehicle cluster forming outside the port perimeter, and it was moving straight toward the extraction lane. At 6:18 a.m., the perimeter lit up with movement. Not panicked, organized. 3 SUVs, 2 cargo vans, 1 flatbed with a covered load, holding just outside the camera angles like they owned the border of the scene. They weren't rushing like people running from the police. They were advancing like a team that believed the route was still theirs. Thermal confirmed it. 8, 10, 14 bodies, cold faces, hot weapons, a recovery unit. They weren't coming to escape. They were coming to take Vega back. Command didn't hesitate. Hold the package. Collapse the approach. At 6:20 a.m., units shifted in silence. Vega was locked into an armored transport. The choke point was sealed. Drones dropped lower, counting bodies and reading intent. The convoy paused at the boundary like it was waiting for an invisible signal. Then it accelerated. The first SUV slammed forward, trying to force the lane. Automatic fire cracked through the cold air, sparks skipping off steel barriers. Agents returned fire in controlled waves, hammering tires and engine blocks. One van tried to slip around a maintenance cut, hit ice, fishtailed, and smashed into a concrete divider like a cannon shot. The fight lasted under 3 minutes. On camera, it looked like chaos. Men scattering behind doors, boots sliding on ice, muzzle flashes strobing across container walls, shouts collapsing into radio codes. The flatbed tried to reverse. It didn't make it. 2 rounds into the engine bay, and it died where it stood, exhaust steaming like a wounded animal. At 6:24 a.m., the approach was secured. Survivors were forced to the ground, wrists bound, weapons kicked away. One suspect kept repeating the same phrase through broken English, like he couldn't accept the reality. Wrong lane, wrong lane. He was right, because the convoy wasn't supposed to meet resistance there. It was supposed to roll through a hole in the perimeter that no longer existed. That told investigators something even more dangerous than the gunfire. The network believed the port was still theirs, even with Rahman in cuffs, even with the containers stopped. At 6:29 a.m., cyber specialists inside the port building finally isolated the last active deletion scripts. The cleanse protocol was still running from an external source, routing through a chain of devices that bounced signal across 3 states. It wasn't amateur. It was professional-grade operational security, designed to keep the system blind while the human pieces moved. And then it happened. The master clock. At 6:31 a.m., the same timer found on the laptop hit another milestone. A final command triggered automatically. Inland transfer. But Vega was already gone, so the system did what it was built to do. It adapted. A second container in the terminal, unrelated on paper, flipped status to cleared. A truck in a different lane suddenly appeared as empty return. A gate opened for a vehicle that didn't belong in any schedule. A decoy run. The network wasn't trying to move Vega anymore. It was trying to move the evidence, because if the truth left the port, the prosecution would collapse again. Not for lack of agents, not for lack of arrests, but because the system would insist it never happened. At 6:36 a.m., teams intercepted the decoy truck before it cleared the perimeter. Inside that container were sealed crates marked as medical equipment. The labeling was clean. The paperwork was perfect. The kind of documents that make people wave you through because they don't want to be the one who delays relief supplies. But the crates weren't medical. They were hardware, encrypted communications rigs, portable signal repeaters, cash vacuum sealed in plastic, stacks of forged port credentials and blank seal tags. Everything needed to rebuild the ghost container pipeline somewhere else within days. At 6:41 a.m., prosecutors initiated emergency sealing orders. The entire Port Authority network was placed under federal control pending investigation. Over the next 72 hours, warrants hit 26 locations across 2 states, brokerage offices, contractor warehouses, private homes, community organizations that existed only long enough to move money and vanish. The numbers stacked up fast. 83 arrests, $21.4 million in cash and gold, 112 encrypted devices, dozens of forged manifests stamped with that same phrase designed to disarm suspicion, humanitarian logistics. And then the financial reconstruction delivered the line that made the room go quiet again. This wasn't theft, this was governance. Over 6 years, the port system had been repurposed into a private corridor, a pipeline that moved criminal capital not by hiding in darkness, but by wearing legitimacy like armor. It used compliance language, charity labels, infrastructure urgency, and the American instinct to trust official paperwork. The port didn't fail because no one cared. It failed because caring was exploited. Malik Rahman's role became obvious in the final audit. He didn't move drugs. He didn't carry cash. He didn't order gunmen. He moved outcomes. He decided what existed, what got scanned, what got inspected, what got erased. He didn't break the system with violence. He bent it with access. At 8:17 p.m., a classified memo circulated through federal leadership, underlined twice at the bottom. The extraction was stopped. The corridor is severed, but the vulnerability remains. Because everyone in that room understood the real lesson. A border isn't only a wall or a checkpoint, it's a database. And the most dangerous traffickers aren't always the ones with guns. Sometimes they're the ones with credentials. If you believe justice should protect this country, even from the people who wear badges and manage systems, tap like. Comment vigilance if you want more stories like this broken down minute by minute. And subscribe, because the next war isn't always fought in the streets. Sometimes it's fought in silence, behind a screen.